Stand by. Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Shooter Ready. With this being the first episode, I feel like some introductions are in order. I'm your host, Jon Shank. I'm not a vet or a cool guy. I'm just a dude who trains a lot. I've been plinking and shooting since I was young, and I started taking classes with my dad in my 20s. My dad learned from his dad learned from Uncle Sam. Training with guns was, of course, an educational experience for me, but it was something I did mostly for fun. Recently, I started lifting weights and practicing jiu-jitsu, and it occurred to me that those activities were a lot more deliberate and intentional than my firearms training had been. I'd started to take it more seriously and think of shooting as a martial art, pujitsu, if you will. Since this revelation, I've made it my personal quest to get good or die trying. That perspective shift inspired me to make a podcast about the concept of training in general, but with an emphasis on firearms training and classes. There are more gear and gun review channels and podcasts than you can shake a bayonet at. Anyone can teach you how to reload and how to pull a trigger, but not many give their opinions on the quality and content of available training options. Hopefully the time and money I've invested in this can help you too. With this being the first episode, I thought we would take this opportunity to start from square one, and I can tell you about how to find a class and how to prepare for a class, both physically and mentally. Also, with this being the first time I've recorded a podcast, you may hear some ahs and some ums, and it may seem a little info dumpy, and it may seem scripted because, surprise, it is scripted. I guess what I'm trying to say is, please be gentle. It's my first time. Now with that all out of the way, let's make ready. So, you have gun will travel. Now what? Finding high caliber instruction in your area may be a bit of a challenge and is more of an art than a science. However, there are a few places that can help you get started. The first thing that comes to mind is local sportsmen's clubs or gun stores and ranges. Seems obvious, right? While sportsmen's clubs are probably more closely associated with trap and other sport shooting activities, they often offer training and events of their own. Many clubs have IDPA or IPSEC events on a regular basis. Unfortunately, I found the bulk of the members of these clubs are boomers, FUDs, or worse yet, boomer FUDs, who aren't really aligned with training or techniques that lean more towards the tactical or self-defense oriented side of things. While the club itself may not have much for you, you may find a few like-minded people there who can refer you to other things in the area. Gun stores, or at least the ones with indoor ranges, may offer similar classes and events, sometimes even on tactical topics. However, these will mostly be somewhat limited in scope due to their facilities being indoors. Also worth checking out are rifle associations for your state. Back when I first started training, I lived in Illinois, a mistake that I've since rectified, and the Illinois State Rifle Association hosted most of the first classes that I ever attended. If you've exhausted all your local options, there's always the internet. Google is probably not your friend in this instance, however, there is Facebook. Facebook has more training-related groups than I can list in a reasonable amount of time, but one in particular that I found to be mostly positive, as far as Facebook groups go, and generally knowledgeable is Training Bullying Works. It's a private group and not specifically focused on classes, but worth taking the time to apply and join. Members are from all over the country and probably have knowledge of what's going on in your area. A new option that I've just become aware of is bulletin.net. That's bulletin without the I. bulletn.net, a site that helps you find classes around your zip code. This site was founded by a student with whom I took the Haley Strategic D5AK class and had an issue with the exact topic that we're discussing right now, and he decided to do something about it, which is great because I was thinking of doing the same thing, so I appreciate him sparing me all the heavy lifting. While the site is still building out its data and it might not have anything for you just yet, it's worth keeping an eye on. Last but not least, we have the big names and known quantities. Instructors or schools who tour the country to offer their own classes or have dedicated facilities. ShivWorks, Haley Strategic, TMAX, Ronin Tactics, Direct Action Resource Center, Warrior Poet Society, and many, many more. While most are excellent options, they usually demand a high price tag and, unless you're lucky enough to live in their area, usually involve some travel and lodging expenses. Now you've found a class and registered for it. What's next on the agenda? Preparation. When thinking about preparation, 2 quotes come to mind. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail, and proper planning prevents piss-poor performance. Who said these things? Sun Tzu, maybe, or perhaps Andrew Jackson, or my neighbor Bob. Regardless of their origins, both of them are true. Allow me to get all zen on you for a moment. If one is to be proficient in their art, they must train. If one is to train successfully, they must prepare accordingly. So how and with what should one prepare for a class? Let's break the preparation process down into 2 categories of action. Internal, things about us, and external, things around us. Internal is the shorter and theoretically cheaper list, so let's start with that. Mindset. You must be open to new information and willing to learn. Use judgment and discernment in regards to new information, but don't dismiss it out of hand. That's how I've always done it. That's how my grandpa taught me. It's just not acceptable. If you're not here to learn, why are you even here? Additionally, and being hyper self-critical, I realize that there is some irony in me saying this. You can't beat yourself up over not performing to self-imposed standards and expectations. As previously stated, you're here to learn and get good, right? So why would you get in your own way and deprive yourself of the opportunity to do exactly that? Mindfulness. You are handling and operating a dangerous and potentially deadly piece of equipment. You must be safe with it. Some instructors may give you a fake gun or a stick if they catch you doing something stupid or dangerous. The ballistics of a stick are suboptimal, obviously. If you do something really dumb, you'll get kicked out of the class, which defeats the purpose of the podcast. So be safe and mindful, for me, at least, okay? Objective. Unless you're a total noob, it will help you if you have a goal in mind for your training, such as a particular technique you would like to learn or a skill to improve. Common examples are becoming more familiar with your weapons manual of arms, improving your trigger puller stance, or improving your speed or accuracy on a particular drill. Physical ability is related to mindfulness, or maybe the same thing if you're one of those "I am the weapon, my gun is a tool" people. Just as we must be aware of the status of our weapon at all times, we must also be aware of the status of ourselves at all times. Most classes in my area, the Midwest, are out in fields with no tree cover. So depending on the season, you may be baking in the sun, or soaking in the rain, or freezing in the snow for hours, maybe days. On top of that, there's usually some movement involved. Even if it's not part of the drill, just going up to check your target can get the heart rate up. And on top of that is the weight of your equipment. You may have heard the phrase ounces or pounds. It definitely adds up, and you will feel it after a while. While these factors are not usually showstoppers for the properly motivated, they are definitely things to keep in mind. Note that this not only pertains to endurance and fatigue, but medical conditions as well. I have asthma, heat sensitivity, and I sunburn like an albino vampire. These are all things that affect my wellness over time, and by extension, my ability to learn and perform. With that in mind, I would recommend that you inform your instructors of any relevant medical conditions prior to starting a class, just in case. The external factors are where the gear nerdery kicks in, but we'll keep it simple for now and start at square one. Keep in mind that your personal list may vary depending on your class and environment. Be sure to read the class description or brief and ensure that you have all that you'll need. The basic set of stuff that you'll need for a class includes a 0 firearm. You know what they say about assumptions, and I can tell you from personal experience that I definitely felt like an ass when I showed up to a long-range rifle class with a rifle that I couldn't even get on paper at 25 yards. Please learn from my mistakes. Next, you'll need sufficient ammo. Most classes will tell you to bring more ammo than you'll need, but it's a situation where it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. To optimize your experience, ammo should also be consistent with what you zeroed it with. Next, you'll need soft gear. The topic of soft gear selection, such as chest rigs, belts, holsters, slings, is going to have an entire episode dedicated to it at a later date. But as mentioned earlier, make sure you have equipment that will meet the requirements of the class. You will most likely need something to hold your ammo, such as a chest rig or battle belt, and something to hold your gun, such as a sling or holster or both. If you're new to training, don't be bullied into spending an entire paycheck on this stuff. While there are solutions that have been vetted and quite literally battle tested, iterative improvement of your gear is part of the learning process, and there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. With that being said, the Amazon Chicom Special is probably not a good choice for whatever it is that you're trying to do. You'll also need protective equipment, aka eyes and ears. I can't stress this enough. Hearing loss is permanent and cumulative. Treat it accordingly. There is another opportunity to learn from my mistakes. I know from personal experience that hearing aids are expensive and electronic ear pro is much cheaper. It's a game changer for me, and it can be used in conjunction with earplugs, allowing you to double up if you want to be extra careful. Regarding eyes, most types and brands of safety glasses will suffice, but you'll want to make sure they're the wraparound type. Some things at the range, cartridge casings, bees, bits of target stand, may try to become acquainted with your eyeballs and should not be allowed to do so. I prefer glasses that come with multiple interchangeable lenses, allowing them to be used in a variety of conditions. Great for indoor, outdoor, or when a sunny day gets rainy. It's also a good idea to have some anti-fog wipes or lens spray on hand in case your glasses start to fog up. Sunscreen and bug spray, you may think it's silly to lump these under protective equipment, but you'll change your mind when you're dislodging ticks from all the places that you haven't slathered in aloe. Let's talk about sustainment. With most classes I've taken being 8 hours long or more, sometimes across multiple days, it goes without saying that you'll need to keep yourself sated and hydrated. Food and snacks are pretty easy. I like protein bars, beef jerky, and trail mix as they're compact, dense, and easy to pack. However, I have friends who've been known to bring steaks and grills to classes. One time someone brought a catering pan full of tacos. So use your best judgment. Hydration is important, extremely important. You can't learn and shouldn't shoot if you're shaky, dizzy, confused, or, God forbid, shitting yourself from dehydration. I recommend bringing a cooler packed with ice and a gallon or more of water per day. I've started putting a gallon guard on mine, kind of like a beer koozie, but for a gallon jug, to help keep it cool. To top it off, I've found that the secret ingredient to water is the liberal application of liquid IV or a similar additive. To loosely paraphrase Blade Runner, it makes water more water than water, and will hydrate the shit out of you, but not literally and in a good way. Of course, Gatorade and energy drinks are good additions to the cooler, but they are not substitutes for water. Clothing is our next topic, and it's something that I was surprised how important it became over time. A majority of training that I've done has been over the spring and summer, so I'm going to focus on that. I trust you're all adults and can dress appropriately for the weather in general. I'll admit, I used to be, and still am to a lesser extent, if I'm going to be honest about it, into the LARP. The first rule is to look cool, right? But black t-shirts and blue jeans will make you hot and soggy and sunburnt, generally gross, and eventually uncomfortable. Even more tactical options usually aren't that great of a fit for spending extended durations outdoors, in my experience anyway. Surprisingly, I've found that companies that make gear for hikers, surfers, and fishermen make clothes that really shine in this area. Seems kind of obvious in retrospect, right? Tops such as rash guards or sun shirts/fishing shirts, particularly those with hoods, offer great coverage, sun protection factor, and dry quickly. While long sleeves may seem counterintuitive for being out in the sun, they keep you from getting crispy. Some also come with built-in neck gaiters and or face masks if you want to sneak in some low-key ninja cosplay. Lightweight hiking pants are good for similar reasons, coverage and weight, etc., and occasionally have the bonus of being incidentally semi-tactical in nature, with pockets that just so happen to be about the size of a multi-tool or pistol or rifle mag. Footwear and socks are up to personal taste, just like everything else, but you should take into account that you'll be spending a lot of time on your feet, often on uneven ground and sometimes in wet or muddy conditions. A hat of some kind, usually a baseball cap or maybe a boonie cap, are good to have on hand as they help keep the sun out of your eyes and off the top of your head. Also, it's usually worth throwing in a light rain jacket, windbreaker, or poncho in your kit bag, just in case the weather takes a turn. Gloves aren't a necessity. I've actually seen a lot of instructors recommend shooting a course without gloves on, but if you're like me, and you're some kind of like reverse Edward Scissorhands who cuts their hands on everything all the time, they're definitely good things to have on hand, pun intended, to keep blood loss to a minimum. A final note on clothing, especially if you're taking a multi-day class, pack an extra change of clothes for the trip home. Your vehicle's upholstery will thank you. Regarding more generalized equipment that you should have, one thing that is absolutely required is an IFAK, or an individual first aid kit. At bare minimum, have a tourniquet and any personal medical necessities you may require, like inhalers or glucose tablets. If you don't know how to use a tourniquet, go find a Stop the Bleed class in your area and take it right now. Go on. I'll wait. Are you back? Okay, good. Let's move on. I found that multi-tools are extremely useful things for range trips and classes. Keep it on you at all times if you can. You never know when you'll need to tweak your zero or tighten this bolt or that screw or open a can of beans. Extra batteries for your optic or light aren't must-haves, but when your optics battery dies in the middle of an exercise, you'll sure wish you brought one. Ask me how I know. A chamber flag is probably a good thing to have on you too. This isn't a necessity, but depending on your instructor or the class, it's probably a good thing on hand to visually indicate the status of your weapon. Lastly, chamois have proven to be absolutely indispensable for me because I am a sweaty, soggy dude, and they're good for mopping yourself off or additional sun cover or keeping your sling from chafing your neck or to just dunk it in a cooler and throw it on your head to cool yourself off. Now you're good to go. I know that was a lot to take in, but I promise with some time and repetition, it'll get easier and easier. Now that you know how to find a class, both online and in person, and how to prepare for one, both mentally and physically, let's take one. Tune in next time for my after-action report on ShivWorks ECQC to see if that's a class that you'd be interested in taking. Finally, thanks to Paulina, Bruce, Brian, Kirk, and Sean for their help and support in getting Shooter Ready operational. I couldn't have done it without you. Do you have questions, comments, or suggestions? Send them my way. I'd love to hear them. You can find me on the web at shooterready.fm or on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or X, or whatever it's called, or YouTube, or Rumble, and Odyssey as Shooter Ready FM.